Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack for Business podcast.
So, a question for the audience. Have you ever felt lost or unheard in the healthcare system, like your story didn't matter? That's exactly what our guest is here to change. In this episode, she reveals how patient voices are reshaping healthcare from faster diagnoses to compassionate care. Tune in to learn how storytelling, empathy, and innovation are bridging the gap between patients, professionals, and policy, and how you can be part of the movement for a more humane healthcare system. Our guest today is Debra Workman from Patients Mirror. She's the CEO of Patients Mirror, bringing both heart and strategy to the conversation on healthcare transformation. Born in Cornwall, Ontario, her lifelong curiosity for science and wellness began as a volunteer candy striper at Hotel Dieu Hospital. That early spark evolved into a purpose driven career amplifying the real voices of patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals. Through Patients Mirror, Deborah shines a light on healthcare gaps, driving awareness for faster diagnosis, equitable access, and compassionate policy change. She also partners in Infocraft, a healthcare marketing agency that serves on the board of UC Lab, where she supports AI innovation in medical research. Beyond her professional world, Deborah's love for art, travel, animals, and lifelong learning fuels her belief that empathy, respect, and shared humanity are the true foundations of better health. Deborah was previously featured on Season 3, Episode 27 of the Knack for Business podcast, which was recorded last October. Deborah, absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome. Do you have a favorite quote or saying you like to share?
When a task has begun, leave it not until it's done. Be a matter great or small, do it well or not at all. So that is actually something I like to live by. And I bring that and that passion to what I do. If you're going to do something and you start it, finish it. And if you can't do it well, don't do it at all.
So your role as a volunteer at an early age, that planted the seed. Was it seeing the patients? Was it hearing their story? Was it hearing the staff? Because everybody has a story in that
No,
whole
and I,
equation.
and, I, and I do have a story. I was quite young. I think maybe was maybe 10 or 11 when I started candy striping. I don't know if anybody remembers what candy striping is, so I'll give you a little bit of background on that first. So candy striping is it's like volunteers in the hospital, but you got this little red and white striped jumper and a little hat, like a little nurse's hat. Nurses don't even wear hats anymore. Anyway, they had the little nurse's hat, and we had a little name tag. And we would go around from room to room bringing water and helping serve the dinner trays. But we'd do anything else. So I remember one particular incident, which again, for me, probably drove some of my passion. There was an elderly lady that had been in the hospital for a while, and she was asking me if I could trim her toenails. Now, I didn't know I had permission to trim her toenails, but it was a need that she had that she couldn't get anybody to service. Every patient has a story. Well, this lady had a story, and the story was that she couldn't get some of the things that she really needed done. Anyway, long story short, I trimmed her toenails. But that, made me realize that not all the needs of patients are being met. And not all the needs are necessarily medically related. Most of your medical related needs are served. It's all the other things around it. Yeah.
So you've just kind of explained something that's really interesting because having been in the healthcare space myself, there's the medical stuff. Like I don't understand what's happened to me. What does this do to me? How does that work? How long am I going to be out? How long is it going to take me to get back on my feet? Right, and get
Mhm,
back to my normal life, if at all, and possible.
mhm.
What are the implications to my family, etc. Those are typically the medical questions that might roll in. But some of the other ones are, where do I park? What are my follow-up meetings or follow-up appointments? Am I supposed to experience pain? Wound management, right? It's
Mhm.
medical, but it's, you're now at home, right? How do I set these things up? How much of a bubble is that a change for somebody when, all of a sudden not planning to go, it's not like you're going to a spa, some people do plan for medical procedures, but if it's an unplanned event, how much of an impact has that to every part of that person?
So, needless to say, we talk to a lot of patients. on any day where we're talking to patients and they're telling us their story. And so the stories are, I ended up in a hospital. I'm going to tell you my story. My story, I ended up in trauma unit. So I'm in the trauma unit, just wanting to leave the trauma unit. That's all I want to do is get out of here. Anyway, they were, I have to say, the first responders were amazing. They were amazing. Everybody that I dealt with was amazing. But you get to see all the other things that are going on in the hospital while you're there, right? And then when I did leave the hospital, they released me and I came home and they're telling me the things I can and cannot do. Mm, And I'm relatively versed in this area, so I did some research and I had a cracked sternum and I had taken a what the cardiologist had said an equivalent of a punch to my heart. My tropamine levels were quite high, and when they released me, they were trending down. They still weren't in the normal zone, but they were trending down. So, after that, I wanted to know, when can I go to the gym? When can I go back to jogging? When can I lift weights again? Because you don't get that information when they release you from the trauma unit. And people were asking me, so when are you going to go back and see the cardiologist? Said it's a trauma unit. They don't do follow up. They don't do follow up. So, it's up to the individual to be an advocate for their own health, to make the calls, to find out who all the information they need. And I mean, I am very fortunate because I am working so much in the healthcare space. I have a lot of people I can actually talk to. So I found out a lot of information. But had I just been, you know, the regular person that'd been in a car accident release would not know what to do. Anyway, so I called my family doctor. I booked an appointment. I went very lucky. I have a family doctor. I booked an appointment, told him what happened. And I had a meeting with him, a call with him, and just asking him, when can I start jogging again? And he's saying, you need to do it. You can't just go out and start jogging again. You took a punch to the heart. When can I, not apparently getting a cracked sternum, it takes a long time to heal. So it takes a long time to heal. It takes, you can't lift anything heavy for, I forget what it was, 6 weeks or 12 weeks. You can't lift any, over your head. And it can take up to a year for the sternum to heal. If you do things that doesn't heal, then you can get infection, you can have to have staples. Anyway, there was a lot of information I was not provided when I left the hospital. And no follow-up. There is no follow-up out of trauma, and I'm sure there's no follow-up. I know there's no follow-up after you leave ICU either, because you're to go back to, if you're in the ICU because you have, had a action to chemo, well, you're just going to go back to your cancer doctor. But in my case, this was a traumatic accident. I don't normally see a cardiologist, so therefore I don't have a cardiologist. So I had to go back to my family doctor, get him referring me to all these different places to do the follow-up, to make sure it was safe for me to continue on doing what I was doing before the accident.
You hit on 2 points, and I'm thinking of, so just went through a recent house renovation, and the guy says, "Do you want this, this, or this?" And I'm looking at him going, yeah, they're like, it's not medical, but it's like a shower head, right? Do you want
Yeah.
this one or this one? Well, what the heck's the difference other than the name and obviously the dollar value, right? And he
Mhm.
says, because, it's like if you've never shopped for a car before, you don't know left, right, that one, right? So in this case, I'm doing the prompting. And we sorted ourselves out, and he explained why, right? It's
Mhm.
for longevity, et cetera. In the healthcare space, if you have a question, like in other words, if you're the patient and you're not with it, then it's going to be harder. Your family has to figure stuff out to help you, or your support circle. Is there a place to go and you go, okay, we just crossed a threshold here. What's next? Or you see something like this, making a question pop up in your head. Is there a place to pick up that information that goes, okay, you've crossed a threshold. Here are the questions to ask. Is there some sort of is there a
Sure.
bot out there? Is there a group out there? Like, where do you go next to get that more informed information?
So it would depend on what you're diagnosed with. If you go to the hospital and you're diagnosed with cancer, there are the Canadian Cancer Association. There are many, many different cancer groups that you could turn to get information that would help you out and guide you through it. We are currently working with an amazing woman that had twin boys, and one of the boys has autism. And she wrote a book because if your child has autism, to find support, to understand what's going on, to find the right support for that is there is no there's no groups. There's no you have to find it on your own. So she actually wrote a book to help other parents, families who have children that are diagnosed with autism, where to go, you know, why, and what is amazing about her is that she works in the healthcare space and has made sure that everything she's put in her book is referenced by a medical study. So, definitely worthwhile getting this book and, but that is one area. There are people who have, if you have a rare condition or if you have a condition that's not been diagnosed, you're pretty much on your own. And that's why it's important for patients to tell their story.
So that's where I was going to go next. So, patient's mirror. So, walk me through that space and what's the purpose and how do you feed the information in and how does the information come out?
So the purpose of the space is to give the patient the opportunity to tell their story. And we're not looking for a story of all the things that have went wrong when you were diagnosed. We're looking for the story of an individual whose goal in life was to be a university professor. And as they went through life, they kept hitting obstacles and finding out why they hit obstacles and finally being diagnosed. So one gentleman was diagnosed with autism at 40 years old. He didn't get to be a university professor, but he did end up being a teacher. And it's a great it's a great story about someone's life who happens to have a condition. And so our goal is to tell people stories about their dreams to be dancers or models or their story, but we also want to hear their story on the health part of it as well, to identify if there's gaps and to draw attention, to educate the public, to let the patient themselves share their story, and to hopefully change policy, to hopefully find resources or find to help fill in those gaps. There's so many different things that are going on. Like one of them is that some drugs are paid for by the government or private healthcare, but
Mhm.
the ancillaries that are used for those patients. So if you have to infuse daily and you have to have an infusion pump, the pump itself is not covered. So there's a lot. Yeah, people don't know that these pumps are extremely expensive, and the patient has to find their own funding. It's just like if you have a condition where you have to have infusion done at the hospital all the time, which is often, or dialysis or whatever, and you don't have access to a vehicle, you're going to have to take a cab. So once a week, you're paying for a cab to go. And if you live far away from the hospital, it's more expensive. And people don't realize the burden it is on the individual, not just the condition they have, but the cost impact of it. And if you can't afford it, then you need to see if you can find family to drive you back and forth. And then it's the impact on them. And so a lot of people are not aware of the story, but also we want the public to know that these are real people with real dreams, real aspirations. They want to their dream is to be a scientist. We have one girl who's got colitis and is going through to be a doctor. And it's because she was diagnosed with colitis, it has driven her passion for science and to want to help other people. So she's telling her story for us, but she's also going through to be a medical doctor so she can actually help patients. And I think that's a great story.
So, we've just covered the patients, the stories where they can also go and understand know what's going on, depending on the nature of the malaise. But that's not the whole purpose, though. There's a flip side to the system, right? It's to the system itself, and not to be adversarial, but it's trying to fine tune. How's that uptake working? How's that uptake been working?
It's actually been pretty good. It's actually been pretty good because we get to actually talk to policy makers. Mm. Policymakers often are not even aware that there is a need or a need for a change or a need for funding, or they are not aware of it. And so until it's brought to their attention and it is a need that is significant, then they will actually make the policy changes. I'm going to give you a for instance. So there is a condition where children are born with their small intestine either missing completely or not attached to itself. So like it's got pieces of it, the small intestine, but they're not attached to itself. There is a drug that will regrow the small intestine. It's approved and available by all provinces except for BC. Now, just so you know, that policy has changed and it is now available in BC. But it wasn't available. So there was a young girl who was 3 years old who'd never tasted food, who'd never had ice cream, who'd never had chocolate, who'd never had spaghetti, because everything is being fed to them in a tube. This another child who lives in Alberta, was 12 years old, started taking the drug that regrew your intestine and had the feeding tubes, and one day just took them out by herself and she could eat. She was eating. Like she just started eating normal. I mean, obviously she still can't eat the same hard to digest foods, but still could have ice cream. And so there are two provinces with two different patients who are suffering from the same condition. One is getting a product that is not available in the other province. And by bringing the problem to the policymakers and the decision makers and telling the story of these patients and how it impacts their lives makes a big difference. And now, of course, the BC does prove this drug. But this is just a small sampling of what can happen through the process.
So you're a marketing firm in the medical space. You have science, you have emotions, you have patients, people that are like, what the heck's going on? Or they've hit a bump. Like it could be getting the cab ride to, access to a medication. From a marketing perspective, for Patients Mirror, would you describe this as a gentle campaign mechanism, not to shame somebody in, but more just to shed light then
Absolutely.
all the players?
It is to give awareness. It is to highlight the gaps. It is to find people to help either mitigate those gaps, remove those gaps, but make change. I mean, the whole purpose of this was driven from my passion from my journey with my own sister. And it's to make change so that people have normal lives, regardless if they have a condition. If they can have a relatively normal life and have a relatively normal lifestyle and not be as impacted by their condition, that's our goal.
Are there any misconceptions around healthcare marketing?
Healthcare marketing or
Yeah. So my prompt here is, what's one misconception about healthcare marketing you'd love to correct once and for all? That said, is that kind of a true
healthcare
point? Or?
marketing. Well, in Canada, you can't market directly to the public unless you're a third party, independent third party. You can't be a drug company marketing directly to the public. You can't market directly to doctors. You can't market to anybody because that's not how our regulations are set up. In the US, if you're a drug company, you can market directly to the public, try Viagra or try Cialis or try Ozempic and maybe you'll lose 50 pounds or whatever. But in Canada, you cannot market directly to the public. And yet we're right next door hearing all their TV ads. I mean, it's in my world, that's just doesn't make a lot of sense because it's the same drug being marketed where we all hear the American. I mean, I don't know about you, but most of the stuff I have on TV is American TV channels,
Yeah.
and so it's interesting.
In comparison to the US, because the US is,
We have an amazing healthcare system.
yeah, no, I get that part. The hospital typically runs as a business. Runs as a business here, except it's
Mhm.
funded mostly by the state, with a few exceptions or a few elements that are. Is there any part that you would see that would be, if you were to cast a quick look at it, this would help improve the system if?
There's so many ways to improve the system, but I would say the number one thing that the government and healthcare need to do, listen to the patients. Like the patient, you hear that I hear it all the time that everybody is patient centric, and yet patients are never asked what they think about something. So now I'm going to give you, for instance, I was privileged to hear that they were going to be introducing AI in the northern communities to do triage. Did they ask the patients if they wanted AI to be doing their triage? And knowing how AI myself, how good is this database? Where did you get this database of symptoms? And, because triage is going to look at you and say, how serious is this?
Yeah.
AI is a tool, it's not a replacement. And honestly, you need to ask patients, how do you feel about this? Because, a big part of healing is having a positive attitude. A big part of, a person getting better is how much they want to get better and how positive they are about getting better and what they believe about getting better. And part of that is the right giving the patient a voice, which is what we want to do, but including them in the decisions that are made. You could have a round table with a whole bunch of medical professionals that are talking about how they're going to fix something, and politicians and government officials, but if there's no patients really there, you're not fixing a problem. It's my opinion.
So trying to form my
I
next
know we're
question.
jumping all around.
Well, no, that's fine. In a world involved with analytics and metrics, and I think we've kind of touched on that. Having a spouse who works in the healthcare field actively right now, and you hear about a physician who's doing a new procedure, and the person is totally ecstatic about it. Says, "We can now do this. We haven't been able to do this before." And it seems like there's an obvious implication for the patient because then it's less invasive, this particular procedure, and it's
Mhm,
going someplace they couldn't before, and they
mhm.
could uh, make more headway for a treatment. That addresses an issue for if you're thinking of reward dopamine hit to the person. I've got a new tool. This tool works really well. It helps people, etc. And the goal is to help the patient. Is there, and that's kind of like a metric, right? Because the system is based on process, its funding, etc. Are the analytics and metrics sometimes just skipping past, or are there some KPIs, key performance indicators, that are missing in the overall picture? That, if you're into bean counting, this will give you a sense of, stronger. Having the story helps, but, if you have, 1,000 patients coming through a hospital or through the province, 1,000 patients a day or 2,000 patients a day, that's a sea of information. How do you distill that? Can you distill it down to go, we're on target, we're not on target? Is there a satisfaction score?
Well, that definitely sounds like AI. If you have all that information coming at you and you need to decipher it, that's a tool that you want to use. It's AI. That's what it does. It analyzes data. It does comparisons. I mean, I think that would be an easy solution. I think there's a whole bunch of things that need to change in our healthcare, and one of them is we really need to embrace innovation. Definitely. But remember that it is a tool. It's a guide. It's to help. It's to make uh, um, diagnosis faster. It's to make treatment plans faster. It's to allow the doctors to spend more time with the patients, which is what patients want, human side health, and to make it more efficient. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the healthcare systems. We all know that. I mean, some of them could be cost saving. And there was a time where and still is, but it's getting better, where hospitals couldn't speak to each other because they all were on different backbone systems. And as you know, Epic came along, and now Epic is being put into Kingston and to Smith Falls. And so all these hospitals will have the same system, which means they'll have your records. That's in this little area of the pond, but where people travel. If I went to visit my brother in Edmonton, something happened to me, they would not have access to my medical files. So, I think sharing of information as well between provinces is helpful. I'm hopeful that the new government is trying to change those barriers where we provinces don't work so isolated and work together to streamline processes. It'd be great if the provinces didn't negotiate individually with pharmaceutical companies for product, but did it as a country. It would give us more clout because you're then a bigger commodity to deal with. Pharmaceutical companies are global and they negotiate pricing and they negotiate many, many different things, and they're doing it all over the world. And so you need to have some strength there. Right now, province by province negotiates what products they will approve to be used in the province and the price point.
So we've talked about patient. Well, no, that's fine. And we talked about the medical staff. We talked about the organization. What about third-party entities that provide support? Like, if you need home care, as a case in point, or even pharmacies or other entities where there's a medical component, like, CPAP machines is
Mhm.
another example.
So those are CPAP machines are some of those ancillaries that are not paid for by the government. If you're on a government plan, they're not going to pay for a CPAP machine for you. You have to pay for it for yourself. That's an ancillary. It's an extra expense. Sorry, I missed the question.
Well, the question is those other external parties, they're part of the healthcare equation for delivery of services, whether they're paid for by the state through the insurance company or out of pocket expense. How do they factor into this whole story other than, I got to take a cab to get to the hospital or to the clinic?
Yeah, so third party, I actually think the third party, as long as it's covered and is regulated. Third parties, I'm sure you're aware of it. Third parties are own a lot of the clinics that you go to. The doctors get paid by the government, but the clinic itself and the doctors rent space from the clinic, and the clinic is owned privately. So, all apple trees are owned privately, whatever they are, they're all owned privately. And I think there needs to be a little bit more regulation on that and more of a watchdog watching the quality of the delivery of services, not the doctor's delivery of the service, but the actual physical location delivery of management of your data, because it's the clinic that will manage your data on behalf of the doctors. So I just think yeah, I think that's great. I think it's really needed more innovation because, Canadians are very innovative. We are a country of many, many small businesses. And small business owners tend to be very innovative. They're trying to get as much as they can for, as you try to do as much as you can for as little as, little amount of money as you can, right? And
Yeah.
so our whole country's made up of that. And that is innovation. Each one of these people have learned something important. And I think third party delivery of certain aspects of healthcare is important.
Are you finding that these third parties are also involved in your picture? Are they engaging with you to provide
We haven't
quality?
actually, so we have not, I guess I'd have to redefine it. We are working with companies that provide ancillaries or devices to patients that have medical conditions. But the smaller companies that offer in home patient care, we haven't explored that area. I'm not saying that we're not in that area. That's not where we are today.
Cool. So I guess that'll be a future state question. The next, if I were to go there, AI tools overall. We kind of touched on them.
Big, of course,
Go
I'm
ahead.
a big supporter of AI tools, but you got to remember what an AI tool is. And I think a lot of people have a big misunderstanding of what AI is. There's no intelligence in artificial intelligence. They run queries against a database, and the answers are only as good as the database they are grabbing the information from. Yes, they can learn as they go, and they'll learn more about the question. Each time you ask it a question, it learns from the question you ask because they give an answer. So they add on to that. And that's maybe they consider that intelligence. But it really, at the very basis, it's got to be the database that you use that makes the difference. And I'm going to give you an example. If I had a database, medical database, but it came from Africa, and I'm trying to do triage in northern Canada, what do you think the results would be of that triage? It'd be crazy.
The symptoms won't match, or
Or
typical
even if they do,
symptoms.
even if the symptoms do, it's unheard of for someone in, you know, Nunavut to get dengue fever.
We would hope. We would hope.
So, I'm just saying that. So it's the most important part of any AI is the data it draws from. There are a lot of private companies that do private AI. So, for instance, and I don't know this at all, but the Ottawa Hospital has its own database of all the patients that have ever come in. And, say every heart attack patient that came in at the Heart Institute, they have a database of the symptoms, all the treatment, the treatment plans, whatever. That is a great database for an AI tool to pull information out when they're trying to, when a cardiologist is trying to assess what's going on with a particular patient, the AI tool would be very beneficial. But at the end of the day, it's the doctor that makes the diagnosis, not AI. It's the doctor that chooses the treatment plan, not AI, because the doctor's the one with the license.
At that, in the hospital, the Ottawa Hospital is using Epic as its backbone.
I do know that. I know that when they implemented it, there was a lot of resistance, but that's with anything. When you get something new, there's always a lot of resistance. I'm not going to use that.
Actually, I came across total segue. I came across an Instagram post, and the person's talking about change. And he was talking about cultural change, and he says there's a window. How much change can you introduce and not have blowback coming back from the group? He's talking on a grander scale. He's talking national, right? So yeah, yes. I guess that was outside the window, and everybody's kind of pulling back.
Well,
And I
it's just,
get
I
it.
think it's, people resist change. It's change is hard for people. They don't know how they're going to fit in. They don't know how they're going to use it. They don't know what's going to happen to them. Is it going to eliminate my job? This new, you know? So there is a lot of change. And then is this going to add more work to what I already have? There's a
Yeah.
lot of resistance. But the bigger picture of a common backbone to all the hospitals is so great for the patients. And it's so great for the doctors as well because they have the opportunity to collaborate more.
So would that be a key factor? Then I'm going to flip it back over to the patient side of the fence now, or even the family of the patient or caregivers of the patient. Because when you're going through a medical situation, an adverse one, that just like, so whether it's a motor vehicle accident or your body just goes, nope, that's it. We're having a bad moment now. That's a change. And so what do you recommend, I should ask, for the patient or the caregivers to adapt to that change that would make it easier for them?
Make it easier for them.
Mhm.
If it is a diagnosed change, or you're in a car accident, someone's in a car accident. My case, I was in a car accident, but say that the trauma that I had to my heart caused heart damage. Then my family, because I would not be in the position, should on their own be an advocate for me and find out as much as they can about the condition and all the information about it. Because mm, mm, there's a saying somewhere that says something about knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And, to be an advocate for your own health is the number one thing that any patient can do. And if you can't do it for yourself, then your family should be doing it for you to find out as much as they can about all the different treatments, about all the different conditions, and you have lots of tools, and the tools will be pharmacists. They are chemists. That's what they are basically. And if you want to know that they're diagnosing, but this is what the diagnosis, you can talk to a pharmacist. You have easier access to a pharmacist than you would to have a cardiologist. No, they're not going to have all the answers, but they will know if two different drugs will interact with each other or whether they won't because they're chemists. And so, you want to use all the tools you can and then find out if you've got this condition, if you're going to be building your knowledge base, find out if there's any associations. So there's all kinds of patient groups and patient associations. And there's some amazing patient associations that provide a lot of information and will give you access to other patients to talk to, where you can get a lot of resources. And that would be for you, the individual, or for caregivers of the individual. Knowledge is power.
Excellent. I guess you kind of bring us into the home stretch here because time flies.
Yes.
Patient's mirror. What are you looking for right now? Are you looking for more patients? You looking for more collaborations with healthcare facilities, political side of the fence? Are you looking for integrations with pharma? Are you looking for NGOs, non-for-profit groups that are out there supporting patients? Who or what would be your primary for the next couple of years?
Our part, so it's a combination of all of it because you can't do. They all work together. You cannot work with a patient without working with the patient group. Because our goal is to support the patient group because the patient group is supporting the patient, not just one, but all of them. And you can't work with the patient group without knowing what kind of doing your research and understanding what is happening with that patient group. So, like cancer, what are the cancer drugs? Who are the pharmaceutical companies? Because you got to tie it all together. And then there are foundations, and there's foundations out there that support a lot of these different therapeutic areas. So it's a matter of, and then of course there's the government piece, the policy making piece. I was at an event last week, and it was called Inside Job, and it was put on by the GI Society, Gastrointestinal Science. I love the name of it, Inside Job. And I got to speak to the former DG, or the Minister of Health, and we were just talking about all the things that he was talking about. We are having a what if moment. If you could have a magic wand and change something, and they were asking these pharma leaders and healthcare professionals, if you had a magic wand in this particular space, which is the GI, what would you do? And they were coming up with all the things. And then I spoke with the former minister, and he said, well, it all sounds great, but you'll need so many dollars. And people don't realize that the healthcare minister has to deal with the finance minister, because the finance minister is going to say, what are you doing with the money I'm giving? And it's not something you're going to do so you get results 20 years down the road. What are you doing today with my money I'm giving you? So there's a bigger picture playing out, and some of the changes that we may want to make is leaving room for the 20 years down the road.
So, Deborah, if someone wants to reach out to you and get a hold of you,
we don't want them to call me. No, just kidding. Absolutely. So,
this person, I don't know this person.
Send us an email. Or find us on social media. I'm always on LinkedIn, but send me an email. I'd be more than happy to somehow help.
What's the email address?
So it's Debra@patientsmere.com. And it's patientsmere.com.
Not patience as in being patient, but
patient
as being the patient, not being in that state of mind.
Yes, Patient's Mirror, yes. And the reason we came up with the name Patient's Mirror, because everybody who looks in a mirror will someday be a patient.
So true. I want to say thank you to Debra Workman for being our guest today, and my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. So, if you haven't gathered by now, Debra helps bring the emotional and informational gap and tries to help reduce it or improve it in regards to healthcare, right? So it's not only just the patients, it's the caregivers, the professionals, the entire ecosystem that brings it forward. The idea is to take the pain that's been in play and find healing and connection through power of storytelling. So reach out to Debra if you have a story to tell, or you want to go, hey, I need more support, or I need to understand more what's going on.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.